So we have a little bit of whiplash. I mean, I think Romain made some good points earlier that the sentiment is really, really negative, not only at the consumer level, but also at the business owner level and the executive level. So this is an interesting market. The seatbelt sign is on, and we're going to continue to wait and see how some of the hard and soft data starts to come in over the next couple of weeks. And really looking forward to that Fed meeting May 7th to see what the Fed does. I think the posturing that they've taken over the last couple of days is that they're not going to budge, even against a president that has been, on the attack against Jerome Powell. So, we're looking out at the next couple of quarters, I think, for long-term investors, and most of our investors are. This is a good opportunity to plant a flag in the sand during this volatility. But a lot of whiplash. I mean, at any moment, this market could turn, and we're watching that very closely.
Well, where do you want to plant said flag then, Alonso, given all of the volatility, given the uncertainty, given the wide swath of industries that may find themselves vulnerable to whatever tariff regime it is that we ultimately end up with, let alone the uncertainty that the consumer may feel as a result? Where are the safe places to be?
Well, it's been a tough market, Kaylee. I mean, everyone has rushed to cash and to gold, and that's done really well in this market. But as we peel back the layers and look underneath the surface in this market, you have great names in technology, you have great names in financial. I mean, you have a lot of sectors that have sold off, not only here in the U.S., but across the globe significantly, given all of the uncertainty. And so there's opportunities to be tactical, to be strategic, and maybe start to take some of that cash off the sidelines. But buyer beware, as we've talked about for weeks, that this market can turn very, very quickly. And as we go into next week and look at Mag 7 earnings, I know we got Tesla yesterday, we'll get Google tomorrow. We're all going to be looking forward to seeing how these companies are going to deliver against an economic backdrop that potentially could continue to show some weakness as we go into the next couple of months.
Interesting. When you consider export controls, when you consider antitrust as the backdrop for the Mag 7 going into this next quarter, are you a buyer knowing that they're sitting on an historic pile of cash? Or are you leaning more towards an S&P equal weight to try to balance things out, not really knowing who's next?
Well, Joe, we're a little bit biased. We've owned tech for a long time, and so we're going to continue to be buyers on this dips. But again, the buyer beware sign is up because at any moment, things could change. And I think that's the difficulty in this market, where on one day there's optimism, on the next there's extreme pessimism. But as we look back at the last couple of weeks, I mean, the sentiment has been really, really negative across all indicators. And for us, that's been a little bit of a contrarian indicator that it's not the end. We are going to get through this. We're seeing a little bit of progress. And the comments from Treasury Secretary have been, I think, in line with expectations that hopefully they have deals on the tables. And that's the risk as we run up over the next 30 to 60 days, that we need to see deals. We need to see trade deals on the table for this market to really expand as we go into the summer.
Okay, so we've covered the comments from Treasury Secretary Best and others that have a hand in fiscal policy. What about what we're hearing from the monetary policy makers? Because if we can put to bed, at least for now, Alonso, the concern over whether or not Chairman Powell stays in his job, then it becomes a question of how he and the rest of the FOMC actually decide to do their jobs. If they're still paying heed to inflationary risk and not going to be cutting rates in the face of potential growth and labor market risks, where does that leave us as the president has taken to calling Mr. Powell Mr. Too Late?
Look, it's tough. That's the one job I would not want to have in this world is Jerome Powell's job, because he has to battle that public perception that he has been late in the past, and that from a monetary policy, they have made mistakes in the past. So as they look forward, I think they're going to want to be patient. They're going to want to see how this data comes in, and the pressure is mounting. Obviously, the president is very vocal on social media, and he has a right to. But at the same time, Wall Street, and I think in general, has pushed back against the fact that we can't force monetary policy. And we're going to wait and see. I think May 7th is going to be a good indicator of what they're looking at and how they feel. And we get a little bit of data. We get GDP, personal income, personal spending. So the Fed will have some good data going into their meeting in a couple of weeks to lay the groundwork and the blueprint on how they cut rates, hopefully this year.
Hey, Alonso, if our radio listeners could see you right now sitting in your office on Bloomberg TV or on YouTube, they'd see a Cybertruck sitting behind you on the shelf. We got big news from Elon Musk last evening. Is Wall Street better off with Elon in Washington or paying attention to his companies?
Yeah, Joe, I forgot to take that down. So, look, we
You have to
heard
take
from
it
the
down.
earnings. We heard on the earnings call that Elon is going to potentially come back, and that's what investors wanted to hear. I mean, Dan Ives has been very, very vocal about this, and in some ways, I agree that Elon has to come back and lead Tesla. He has a lot of companies, and I don't know how he has the time in his day to get it all done. But it is likely that he transitions back to leading his private companies and leading Tesla, and that was welcome news. I thought the earnings call was great. Tesla's had a tough run this first quarter, and hopefully things turn around going into the back half of this year.